أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله أوله بلا أول كان قبل وآخره بلا آخر يكون بعده الذي قصرت عن رؤيته أبصار الناظرين وعجزت عن نعته أوهام الواصفين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا حبيبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين أبي القاسم محمد وعليه الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الدائم على أعدائهم وغاصبي حقوقهم ومنكري فضائلهم ومناقبهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم والسلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for providing us with tawfiq to commemorate the 10 days of Muharram and to show our presence, our participation in the azadari of Imam Husayn alayhi salam, alongside with the lovers of Ahl Bayt alayhi salam all across the world, and indeed with the Imam of the azadari, which is Hujjat ibn al-Hasan al-Askari. We extend our condolences of the martyrdom of Imam Husayn and the family members and the ashab of Imam Husayn to the Imam of our time, and also we share the pain and sorrow and condolences to the lovers of Ahl Bayt alayhi salam. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In this series of discussions, we pointed out to some of the historical events that unfolded and which led Imam Husayn alayhi salam to sacrifice his life, what those events were, what those reasons were, which eventually Imam Husayn have to take that step in which he gave away his life and his children's life and his companion's life. And also in this we also have the imprisonment of Ahl Bayt alayhi salam. They were taken captives right after the shahadat of Imam Husayn alayhi salam, and they were taken to Kufa in a couple of days, and they were placed there, and from there to different manatiq or different places they were stopped, and eventually reaching Sham. So this whole thing we kind of briefly analyze, and at the same time we also reflected a bit upon the mystical or philosophical angle of things that were there. And tonight we would like to briefly look at these sacrifices of Imam Husayn. Did it bring fruit? Was this sacrifice a successful sacrifice? Was Imam Husayn alayhi salam victorious? Obviously we may say, as a follower of Imam Husayn and Shia of Ahl Bayt alayhi salam, yes, Imam Husayn was victorious. But outwardly speaking, one would say that, well, it was a defeat. You are taking the women and children as captives, and the whole battalion is defeated, and they are not victorious at all, outwardly speaking. So what type of victory is that you're talking about? So we would like to kind of very briefly look at it, as which was the purpose of Imam Husayn, where he was mentioning that I'm doing my qiyam in order to create the reform. I'm doing the qiyam for Amar bil Maruf wa Nahy anil Munkar. I'm doing the qiyam so that the sunnat of Rasulullah is established or not. Whether he achieved all which he decided for, which he sacrificed for, or he did not. Although, a 40-minute discussion is not really sufficient enough to, come to a conclusion, but we were just gonna go through over some of the head topics, or kind of look at some of the principles that we can extract from history and move on, inshallah, and do the zikr of masaib and musibat of Ahl Bayt alayhi salam. Help me with the salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. I mean, we know for sure that in any movement, any haraka, in any uprising or any movement that takes place in order to establish a new system, and that's what Imam Husayn is trying to do here. It is trying to revive a system which was completely forgotten, or establish a new system in any uprising or any movement, whether that be social or political, or even within a small company. When you try to bring changes and revive things, when you try to influence, this is naturally influence. This revival of system naturally influences the people around. Whether they be part and parcel of that system and helping that sort of uprising or not. Individuals are naturally influenced by it. People who are around, they are naturally influenced by it. Now, obviously, when the uprising is for higher principles, such as justice, such as equality, such as reform, such as humanity, all of these higher principles, even if this is led with what you call personal gains, a person may be having these sort of all. Usually we find these political leaders that in order to gain their vote, they talk about all of these good things, in the third worlds and so on and so forth, and at the end of the day we get nothing, right? So even an individual or a person who utilizes these sort of big names and big principles, try to still, there is some sort of influence in public that happens, but and the influence may not last longer, because one clearly sees the hypocrisy of the leadership, right? And definitely will give gain to a certain degree or a certain period of time for the leader at least to come in the office. Or if the person is really to a certain degree sincere, it may help a particular family to carry that legacy. Oh, this political leader family was Gandhi family or Kennedy family or this and that, whatnot and the other. So still it kind of lasts for a bit. However, it is not something that it becomes a timeless legacy, something that becomes an eternity. What we find in Imam Husayn Qiyam is that these values which Imam Husayn stood for and sacrificed his life for, it still remains. And we can clearly see that. Right? And that's what I would like to look into each and every one of them with a subheading, and probably provide a little bit based upon the sermons of Hazrat Zainab Salamullah Alaiha and Imam Zainul Abidin Alayhi Salam. Salawatullah Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now, if you look at the Prophet himself, when he came to Arabia, what sort of culture, what sort of values the Arabs of that time had? I mean, the archaeologist or the anthropologist, not the archaeologist, anthropologist, when they reflect upon and try to analyze the values and the cultures of the Arabs of that time, Arabs were basically becoming extinct. Just like how some of these species of animals, they just vanish and disappear. Maybe because they were unable to cope with the environment, or maybe they were too wild so that the nature just decided to remove them from the face of the earth. This could be the two reasons. One is that they were not compatible, they just extinct. Or they were not, they were so wild enough that naturally, something happened that they were not suitable, So Arabs, the anthropologists, they regard that the Arab race was going to the level of being extinct from earth if it wasn't for the Prophet. I mean, imagine where burying young daughters alive becomes a cultural value for a system, for a society. What type of growth the society will have, right? And they used to boast and be proud that I have buried 6 daughters alive, I have buried 12 daughters alive. I mean, if values of a race, of a community, of a system becomes that, obviously it's going towards extinction. This is one of them. Apart from that, the amount of wars that they used to fight on each other on silly issues like my horse is more white than your horse. right? I mean, they used to boast and they used to count the graves of their, of their tribes, and they say, Alhaakumut takasur hatta zurtumul maqabir. That's the Quran. And be proud of. So when they are being proud of themselves in killing each other, an Arab comes to the Prophet from a Badu, a Bedouin, and Prophet is talking about, value of life and humanity and justice and all that. Okay, all good. And they say, what about Jannah? Yeah, Jannah also. Then this Arab asks, is there sword in Jannah? Prophet said, no, there is no sword in Jannah. And he said, I don't want this Jannah. This is how they were. And look, it's 180 degree. Prophet took them from where to where. That's why they say, all of humanity acknowledge that the most successful man on this earth is no one but Muhammad ibn Abdullah. I mean, it is fascinating what he did. Within the span of 63 years, right? I mean, his mission actually started after 40. The Wahi came, and then within the span of 23 years, he revived the whole system. He revived all the Arabs and make them reach, with what they had to the east and west, right? But however, the survival of the Islamic sort of, civilization was later on based upon the values which was revived by Imam Husayn. Because by the time Imam Husayn alayhi salam, as we have seen what was happening in history for the past, nights we are looking at it, Muslims have completely lost it. Nothing of that existed. Where governors are those who are, drink alcohol and lead prayers instead of 2-4. That was happening in the Islamic Empire. Right. So a system which was for humanity, which was to save human beings, which was based on knowledge. Imam Ali, if you reflect upon the khutbahs of Amirul Mu'mineen, he clearly says that you guys were eating lizards. It is the Rasul, it is the Ahl Bayt who have brought you out. That's how you guys were. You guys used to fight each other. But look now, what Prophet have done. Prophet is paying attention you towards the heavens, looking at the time of prayers, the sun and the moon. He has taken you out of this darkness. Right? This is what the Prophet did. And then, as he promoted ilm, as he promoted equality, he supported the have-nots. He got rid of the tribalism. That's why you look at the poor people, they used to feel ashamed of being poor. But when Prophet was among them, would sit with them, nobody recognized who is the Prophet, but at the same time, a personality, a person who is so knowledgeable, a person who God have chosen him, a person who is the statesman, who leads, who answers, who debates, right? So look who Prophet was and look what Prophet did. Inna akramakumul indallah atqakum. That black slave for the Arabs was disrespected. And here is Bilal standing on the Kaaba and giving azan. From where to where? Even he had a problem in his pronunciation of things, as the Arabs were so proud of their pronunciation and balaghat. And then he says the azan of Bilal is more lovable to Allah than azan of anyone. Because they criticize that he cannot even recite properly. A typical criticism of Bani Israel, when they came and complained to Musa alayhi salam that why Musa is chosen, because he stutters, he doesn't even recite Torah properly. They troubled Musa so much with different reasons not to follow Musa. So Prophet brought that equality, Prophet brought that justice, that ilm, knowledge, promotion of values, and that was completely being deteriorated, dissolved by Bani Umayyah. And here Imam Husayn revives that. That's what he says. He reaches to the point of reviving it. All of those things that were in Jahiliyat, those things were clearly brought amongst the Muslims, and Muslims started following that. And we have looked at, how the ideology, knowledge, philosophy, the interpretation, Quran, law, fiqh, how things were changing. And then Imam Husayn had to go to that height of getting himself slain in that fashion. And then he saw nothing but this. There was no other option for him. Husaynu minni wa ana min Husayn. This is what it means. That and it was, just coming out of all of the i'tiqadat and aqidah and all that is really sad. To really look at it, that the grandson have to give so much in the most gruesome fashion. He was slain and killed. And his Ahl Bayt alayhim salam arrested. For the sake of grandfather, for the sake of Quran, for the sake of deen, for the sake of humanity. Was it successful? Here we look at it. Hazrat Zainab Salamullah alayha was arrested. The Ahl Bayt were arrested. Kulsum have the longest khutbah that she gave in Kufa. Hazrat Zainab khutbah is shorter in comparison to the khutbah of Kulsum. And there was a revolution. Kufa changed. It's so strong. I recommend you all to go and just read the khutbah of Hazrat Zainab, which she delivered in Kufa. It's so strong. The words that are there. People were crying. People were sobbing. They say that people saw their beard being, shedding tears. They were filled with tears, their beard. Old people, young people, women, ladies, children. They were ashamed of not supporting Imam Husayn alayhi salam. And Hazrat Zainab made them realize that by her khutbah. This realization. As soon as this started, that's why you have these uprisings started taking place from little to big. I'll mention a couple of them. Because Husayn was killed in that fashion, Zainab delivered that sermon. Now, as we always look, the spiritual angle of things and also historical things as well, I'll just mention one hadith here, that when she reaches Kufa, she wanted to speak. Obviously, it's a crowd. There are camels and horses, soldiers, the heads of shuhada is brought, and so on. It was like a carnival, full of people. When we have few people extra, so much noisier. It's very difficult to speak. We really need to announce so many times in the mic for them to be quiet. Our people. But over there is what? They had no sort of, guilt as such. They were not expecting any of that. They were just watching. They came here to watch what's going on. And here's a Zainab. The narrator reports, Kamil Ziyarat is the reference, that when she made an ishara, she asked everything to be silent. Because she was trying to speak, there was too much noise. She raised her arm and she said, silent. There was silence. And there was silence. The nafas of people, the breath of people remain in their chamber. And the Rawi reports that even the bells that were ringing, that stopped. And there was nothing but a silence. Echo of the silence was like at that time. How is that possible? Now here we look at the Irfani perspective, the Wilayi perspective. It's wilayat. When a person reaches to the maqam of wilayat, and imamat is the maqam of kun fayakun. Hazrat Zainab said, kun fayakun. What is wilayat? Very briefly, you can unwind it, unfold it in your free time. Wilayat come from walaya. Walaya means something close. You are closer to, Kazim Bhai is closer to the wall is closer to the Kazim Bhai. There's walaya there, there's a wilayat existing there. Kazim Bhai is far, but at the same time close to my heart. There's wilayat there. Just close, different types of closeness I'm talking about. Kazim Bhai is aware of the closeness, but the wall is not aware of the closeness. It's also a type of closeness, right? So I'm trying to explain what wilayat is. What's the position of wilayat? Who is a wali? Which comes from walaya, which means closeness. Sometimes the closeness is the closeness of your eyes to you, which is you have full command over your eyes, over your ears, over your tongue. That is also closeness. Sometimes even, we say things that we don't want to say, because of being pressured by things. There's a bit of distance there too. Then we realize I shouldn't have said that. But sometimes, or for example, another type of closeness is the closeness of the rays and the sun. Everything that the rays have is because of the sun. If there is no sun, there is no rays. That's the true wali. That he's so close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he's nothing or she's nothing. Everything is nothing but Allah. وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. Oh Allah, when you shoot, oh Prophet, when you shoot the arrow, it is not you who are shooting. It is Allah shooting. That is wilayat. The act of the Imam, the act of the wali becomes the act of God. Here is Zainab. She says, silence. That's wilayat. That's wilayat. It is not Zainab saying silence. وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. It is Allah through Zainab to deliver that message, the khutbah which Zainab have. Because Husayn have sacrificed his life for Allah. And just the same way, نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَاهُ الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. We have revealed the Quran and we will protect the Quran. Husayn has given the sacrifice for us and we will protect the sacrifice of Husayn. She gives that khutbah. She reminds them three things. Sheikh Abbas Qummi in the commentary of the khutbah have pointed out to three different classification or two different levels of the khutbah. I'm not going to read the whole khutbah. I'm just going to read these three things which she did in the khutbah. The first thing that she did was, she explained and unveiled the governance of Muawiyah to be illegitimate. She clearly did that. That this Muawiyah rule was an illegitimate rule. This is after them and reminding them of who Husayn was. And they were aware, they were the one who wrote, right? They had that understanding. Kufa was the capital. Hazrat Zainab's father was the wali, was the khalifa at that time. They have seen Ali. Some of them were the ashab there as well. In Kufa, living in ashab. Abdullah ibn Afif was there. Zayd ibn Arqam was there. We'll talk about them in a bit. They were aware of it. So once when they were awakened, they were shaken up, then she said, she unveils who Muawiyah is and who Yazid is, right? And then she pointed out to this, the way how Husayn was slaughtered, the horrific crime that they carried out. She mentions that in the khutbah. That how can they justify this? In no way that they can justify killing of the grandson is okay. At least for the Kufans. In Syria, okay, maybe they might not know. This is Kufa here. How can they justify that? She asked, what's the justification of Bani Umayyah behaving in this fashion? Right? And the third thing she points out to is the importance of who an Imam is. Look at that. Some of the Orientalists, they tend to write without understanding, because the only sources that they have is Imam Baqir and Imam Sadiq, that Imamat is something, the Shiaism, they started after There was no imamat before at the time of the Prophet. Only it started in the time of sixth Imam. So they are critical of the Shi'i thought, by saying that it's actually sixth Imam they started. Actually, it's not the case. Excuse me, you don't understand what imamat is. Imamat traces back not to the historical, it goes back to the mystical reality. Inni ja'iluka fi nase imama. That's a Quranic concept. Imamat is idh ibtala Ibrahim bi kalimatin fa atimmahun inni ja'iluka linnasi imama. That's the reality of imamat. So here Hazrat Zainab salamul alayha, she points out to the importance of what imamat is. These are the seeds been laid for the future generations to understand. Ya ayyuhar Rasul balligh ma unzila ilayk. Rasul was like, oh man, nobody really understand this. Allah says, balligh, you have to. Even if there be 5-6 people know what wilayat and what imamat is. What Mawla is, maybe only Salman, Abu Zar, Miqdad, Ammar. These people may understand. It's okay, you got to mention it. It is from that 3, 2, 4, 5 people who understand what imamat is has reached to this. How fascinating, how powerful, how beautiful the concept and the reality and the truth of imamat is. Where it takes us. From arsh to, from farsh to arsh. In terms of understanding what Tawheed is. In the nutshell. In terms of understanding what Qiyamat is. Right? In terms of understanding who we are. Is imamat. Right? So therefore, Hazrat Zainab, the third thing that she did was she pointed out to the importance of imamat. Right? After that is a khutbah of, Kulthum, a very long khutbah. I mean, they've been pounded, they've been kind of reminded and shaken over and over again. You have Hazrat Zainab giving khutbah. That's why, this is the Masai part. However, it's, people usually use for head of Imam Husayn, Ibn Ziyad, and he tried to disrespect. Zayd ibn Arqam was there. He says, Ibn Ziyad, what are you doing? Where did you get that courage from? It's a khutbah of Hazrat Zainab. It's a khutbah of, Kulthum, delivered before they were brought in the castle of Ibn Ziyad. They delivered this khutbah outside. And people, it spreads like a wildfire. What's going on? The whole Kufa was in Matam. They brought a chadar and gave it to the women and children, which was looted. They brought a hijab and gave it to them. The soldiers had no control. Later on, it is once again these chadars were snatched in the areas that they were going, who were Nasibis or who were, I don't know, had no clue that who these are. They were announced as prisoners of war. But this is Kufa. So after these speeches, after speeches, and the strength of courage, they were strong. Then they enter, Ibn Ziyad have prepared the whole castle and says, bring the prisoners. The prisoners were brought. The head of Imam Husayn was there. And he was making fun and laughing, and that's where he says that, how did we defeated you, Zainab? How did you see the defeat? Ma ra'aytu illa jamila. I saw nothing but beauty in the plain of Karbala. Right. So there was Zayd ibn Arqam, who was a Sahabi Rasul, who was old. Perhaps because of him being that old, he may have not been able to reach Imam Husayn to support and help. But here he speaks out. He speaks out and says, what are you doing, Ibn Ziyad? This is the son of Husayn, the head of Husayn. I saw Rasulullah kissing the lips. You're disrespecting the lips of Husayn, and you're hitting with a stick on the lips of Husayn. He got upset. He said, wow, aren't you? What are you saying? Argument. People started crying there. And then he left. He left the castle. He couldn't really manage to win over the Ahl Bayt alayhi salam. And then he went to masjid. When he goes to masjid, goes on top of the pulpit, Haqq is victorious over Batil. Abdullah ibn Afif was there, who was a blind person, was also Sahabi of Rasul and Amirul Mu'mineen, who had lost his both eyes while fighting along with the Amirul Mu'mineen with the enemies. He was there, Abdullah ibn Afif Adi. He said, Haqq and Batil? What are you talking about? This is Ahl Bayt, he's with the Haqq. Mal'oon, he started saying, you are Mal'oon. And Mal'oon ibn Mal'oon. Who gave that courage? What's happening? The very Kufans who were not prepared to support and help Imam Husayn, there is jurat, there is strength coming in them. They are getting ready to speak out against the tyranny. And then we know the whole story. We maybe will recite in Masai as well what happened to Abdullah ibn Afif. The tribes, they want, Ibn Ziyad said, arrest this person, and kill him. Then the whole tribe of Hadi stood up and said, we're not going to allow this. And there was a fight later on. You see this revolution, this uprising of Imam Husayn started taking place. People started supporting that message of Imam Husayn. Right. And then obviously they were in prison in Kufa, and they were asked to be taken to Syria and Sham. And that's where we find the khutabat of Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Another salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So far within Kufa itself, I mean this was the methodology of the Ahl Bayt. This is how they started. First thing, it was that the Muslims were shaken and awakened after the shahadat of Imam Husayn. They were awakened. As they were awakened, they were shaken and awakened. That's why they started supporting all of this small qiyam of Mukhtar, qiyam of Zayd, qiyam al-Tawabin, which took place. I mean, Bani Umayyah were completely uprooted because of this act. They vanish, they disappear. Today also nobody knows where is the lineage or, hidden. No idea where they are. But what about Sayyid? Oh, Sayyid, Shah Sahib, Sayyid. People proud, belonging to the Hashemites. All over the world. Sadat, Sayyid. Where Bani Umayyah wanted to uproot the name of, Hashemites, right? So here, first thing is the awareness were given. Awakening took place after the shahadat of Imam Husayn. Then after that is the Ahl Bayt introduce the negation of the leadership and the illegitimate leadership that was existing of Muawiyah. Clearly, they unveil that. And also as the Qiyam, as we spoke about, the tribalism and all of that was were there, and Imam Husayn brought everybody and spoke about the equality. Then in the same messages and speeches of Hazrat Zainab and Imam Zainul Abidin, you find that element of equality and against racism. Fizza was there, how Fizza was supported, how Fizza is seen, of Minna Ahl Bayt. I mean, look how humble the Ahl Bayt were. That they regarded those people from Ahl Bayt. Salman, who was not of an Arab race. Abu Zar, who was somebody who was a Bedu. He says, Abu Zar minna Ahl Bayt. Ahl Bayt is from us. That's how they spoke about equality. The other thing that we find that provided them was the reviving of the values which were completely forgotten. People had become selfish. People had become caring for their own and their mal and their family. But the value of isar, selflessness came about. Those who supported Tawabin, they were selfless. Those who supported to protect Abdullah ibn Afif, they were killed. They were selfless. Where are they getting this courage from? They say, grandson of Rasulullah sacrificed himself in this fashion. Who are we? Zayd ibn Zayd, who was from Zaydis, Zayd was from the family member, how he was slain and killed. 40,000 came to support him, Zayd. But 270 remain in Kufa. It was a history that repeated itself. But at least now from 72 is 270. And that Zayd names remained in history, and what they did with his body even after that. He was buried, they took his body out and put it on the door for 4 years. His body was on, because he has done uprising qiyam against Bani Umayyah. And then later on his body was burnt, so on and so forth. But Zayd remains, his qiyam remains. So where this all, righteousness and selflessness came from? What's the source of it? Is Husayn. Is that sacrifice of Imam Husayn alayhi salam. And they all, Mukhtar the same way. How many people fought with Mukhtar and they were saying that we don't care about our life now. We have to, take the avenge, Tawabin, those who did Tawbah from not helping Imam Husayn, we want to do Tawbah. Because they were guilty of the crime which has been committed. Right? Their spirit came back to life. And so this value of all of this jihad, this aspect of, this courageous principle of Furu'ad-Din came because of the qiyam of Imam Husayn. They were ready to sacrifice their life for the principle which Imam Husayn laid. And we find that in the course of history. Right? Because it's a timeless legacy. It's there and it will be there. And this is what the 12th Imam requires. You know what I mean? So that we started seeing, like for example, you have the Buyud 250 after Hijrah, where they revolted against in Mazandaran, Tabaristan, they call it, the qiyams that took place, and the first Shia dynasty happened to be established in Mazandaran, Iran, near Caspian Sea. Their slogan was Imam Husayn against the king, whoever it was in Iran, right? So where all this remained and came from? I mean, today the amount of isar that the Iraqis do in 40th of in Arba'in, inshallah, may Allah give tawfiq to you all, go and do the ziyarat inshallah this year, those who are going, inshallah. It's from Imam Husayn. A quality which was forgotten, a trait, a virtue which was completely, and it went back to the Jahiliyat type of behavior and virtue of being selfish. Imam Husayn revived that. Salat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The other thing which we saw was that the amount of religiosity and religious discipline among the Muslim communities. Because Imam Husayn said, my qiyam is for Amar bil Maruf Nahy Anil Munkar. I mean, when you have a Khalifa openly drinking and playing with monkeys, Yazid, right? And there is no Amar bil Maruf, that's why. Every other people are doing the same thing. But when Imam Husayn is saying, I'm doing this for Amar bil Maruf, my qiyam is for that. There was some sort of discipline, criticism, enjoining good, prohibiting evil started taking place in Muslim Ummah. And today what we see, Muslims being Muslim regardless of what, Shia or Sunni, It is the sacrifice of Husayn and the teachings of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. Any fiqh that they follow, they want to follow the fiqh Hanafi or Hanbali or Shafi'i, and right. Even, we have poetry from Imam Shafi'i which says that if you see the same philosophy, the same political, tool, oh, these are Rafizis, the lovers of Ali, these are Rafizis, these are kafir. Time of Shafi'i I'm talking about, not now. At that time, right? Oh, these are Rafizis. Then Imam Shafi'i says that if loving Ali is being a Rafizi, I'm the greatest Rafizi. That is Ali. Bismillah. Sorry, continue. We will come back to it, inshallah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. वफा जो अहमद मुरसल से कर गए होते, अली को मौला समझकर सुधर गए होते, न घर बतूल का जलता न करबला होती, अगर ये तीनों ही बचपन में मर गए होते. बारे दीगर सलावत. अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मद व आले मुहम्मद. So I mean, you have the same sort of, but at the same time you have Shafi'i being the student of the sixth Imam, the ilm, knowledge, whatever limitation all of this fiqh have, there is at least some sort of value and principles. There is salat, there is prayer, there is, selflessness, akhlaq, respect for Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, which wasn't there, love of Imam. Today, look at it. The whole social media, when it comes to Husayn, I mean, we couldn't imagine, I'm pretty sure, when you guys were young, that it was this much of name of Imam Husayn and Imam Ali being mentioned in televisions or among our Sunni brothers. On the 19th of the month of Ramadan, it's a whole sort of discussion of what happened to Imam Ali. It was not impossible at all among the Ahl Sunnah scholars speaking about this, right? And we see this gradually, our Sunni brothers are coming to the understanding of Haqq and Batil. That's why they wrote books against Muawiyah, Allama Maududi, Tahirul Qadri, and many others. They are very openly critical about that. But it's still a bit too soon. It's going to happen eventually. Sooner or later, it's going to go in that direction. Because the beauty of Husayn and Ahl Bayt is so apparent. And this also depends on our behavior. How much we, shadow and how much we reflect the behavior of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. This will allow them to come towards thinking of Ahlul Bayt and, these are these people are the Shias. And that's how they are. That's how they love Imam Husayn. That's how they behave. That's how they treat each other. That's how they do business. That's how you can depend on them. They are truthful in their vow, so on and so forth. This is also very important. So now, very briefly, because there's no time, I will just mention, now this caravan was taken to Syria. And in Syria, you have the sermon of Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam. And I will just read you that couple of lines from that sermon. And obviously this is Syria and Sham. You can imagine that people are a bit confused and unaware of what's going on. And here, Yazid is introducing that these are rebels and they were going against me and I have arrested them, I have brought them. And eventually Imam Zainul Abidin request to give a sermon. He wasn't allowed. Yazid was too scared, but this young son of Yazid says that it's okay, give him that opportunity. In any case, something happened that Imam Zainul Abidin was given the opportunity to speak. Now he started giving a khutbah. It's Imam Zainul Abidin. And the amount of depth that khutbah have after praising Allah, so on and so forth, and then that's how he begins. He begins by saying, Ayyuhan nas a'atina sittan wa faddalna bisab'an. O people, we've been given 6 things and we have given fazilat on 7 things. Atina al-ilm. That's the beginning. Allah gave us ilm. Wow, this is like in Syria in the courtyard of Yazid, the fourth Imam, young individual who's a prisoner of war, speaking in this eloquency. Allah gave us ilm, Allah gave us hilm, Allah gave us samaha wal fasaha, Allah gave us shuja'a, Allah gave us, and one of the things that Allah have given us, fazilat with, is the love of ours in the heart of the mu'mineen. The mu'mineen's heart is filled with our love, with the love of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Who is this man? What is he talking about? All of these people there. It goes on and on and on. He talks about who Rasul was, who Ali was, and then eventually, he goes to the point where he started saying that, I am the son of Makkah wa Mina. I am the son of, he says, Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He says, on the night of Mi'raj from Masjid al-Haram to Masjid al-Aqsa, who was taken away? It was my grandfather. Every little detail he talks about it, right? And eventually he says that once the azan starts, he says, this, what's going on? I say, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah. And then what he's saying, it is in my flesh and blood, my whole body bear witness that, my flesh. And then when he says Muhammad Rasulullah, then he looks at Yazid. He says, this name Muhammad, is it your grandfather or my grandfather? People were shocked. Look, if there was no sacrifice of Imam Husayn alayhi salam, this message of Imam Husayn wouldn't have reached the outward pulpit of Yazid's courtyard, where there were Christians. One of the person who was Christian there, he stood up and he says, who are they? Tell me. Yazid says, not important. But he says, no, I want to know, because when I go back to Rome, I want to tell them, I saw this. Then he says, this is who's the son of Fatima? Who's Fatima, daughter of Rasul? He said, this is what you do? He's your prophet, right? This is how you treat the grandson of the prophet? And then he gives a story of how we respected a little thing that remained from Isa alayhi salam, and how we do tawaf of that. And you have killed the grandson. And then he got upset. And then eventually he was killed. And before he was killed, he says, yes, last night I had a dream of Rasulullah. And he invited me, and this is coming true. He was killed by the hands of Yazid. So you see, this whole sort of sacrifice of Imam Husayn did not go to waste. And today when we take the name of Imam Husayn alayhi salam and value it, and where is the name of Yazid? This is the greatest proof. But it is a big sacrifice. It is a painful sacrifice. Our heart shatters and breaks. What the Ahlul Bayt have been through. When, I will give you a little story, जब ज़ैनब को अमीरुल मोमिनीन ने कूफे के तरफ, क्योंकि कूफे में कैपिटल हो चुका था हज़रत अली, और वहाँ पे मूव हो चुके थे, अपने बच्चों को वहाँ लेके चले गए थे कूफे में. पूरी दास्तान है कूफे में, हज़रत उम्मे कुलसूम के घर से ही गए थे अमीरुल मोमिनीन. तो कहा गया है कि जब हज़रत अली ने अपने बच्चों को, उम्मे कुलसूम और ज़ैनब को कूफे ले आए थे, अभी गुरूब नहीं हुआ था, तारीकी नहीं हुई थी. तो दरवाजे के पास रुक गए थे, कहने लगे कि अभी हवा, आसमान रोशन है, मैं चाहता हूँ कि एहतराम के लिए ज़ैनब और उम्मे कुलसूम, कि जब तारीकी हो जाए, मैं जब वारिद शहर होना चाह रहा हूँ. मगरिब हो गई, आसमान की तरफ निगाह की और कहने लगे अभी भी उस तरह की तारीकी नहीं है, कुछ लम्हा, कुछ वक्त और सब्र करना पड़ेगा. जब हवा पूरी तारीक हो गई, तारीकी कूफे में छा गई, वो वक्त अली ने ज़ैनब और उम्मे कुलसूम को वारिद किया कूफे. और ये वही ज़ैनब है इस कूफे में असीर होके वारिद हो रही है. किस तरह से ये असीरी, कहा गया है कि जब असीर किया गया ام کلثوم اور زینب کو اور بیویوں کو جب اسیر کیا گیا، بازو میں رسن باندھی گئی، توق اور بیڑی اور زنجیر میں سجاد کو باندھا گیا، اور اس قافلے کو مقتل سے لے کے جایا گیا، شہداء کے لاشوں کے قریب سے لے جایا گیا، کیونکہ یہ چاہتے تھے ایذا اور تکلیف دے، ماؤں اور بہنوں کو تکلیف دے۔ جب امام زین العابدین اپنے باپ کا لاشا قریب سے دیکھتے ہیں، زینب تو دیکھ چکی تھی شام غریبہ میں جب سکینہ کو، لیکن جب امام زین العابدین اپنے باپ کا لاشا دیکھتے ہیں تو زینب کہتی ہے کہ میں دیکھ رہی تھی سجاد کو کہ اس کی روح پرواز کر چلے جائے گی۔ یہاں پہ زینب آگے بڑھ کر سجاد سے کہتی ہے، سجاد اپنے آپ کو سنبھالو، انا للہ و انا الیہ راجعون، اللہم تقبل ھذا القربان، خدا قبول کرے اس قربانی کو۔ تو امام سجاد فرماتے ہیں کہ پھوپھی اماں، میری روح کیوں نہ پرواز کر جائے، جبکہ میں دیکھ رہا ہوں کہ میری بابا کی لاش بے گور و کفن اس طرح سے کربلا کے میدان میں ہے، جبکہ میں دیکھ رہا ہوں کہ یہ لعینے اپنے رشتہ داروں کی لاشوں کو دفنا رہے ہیں، لیکن میری حسین کی لاش اس طرح سے ہے، میری باپ کی لاش اس طرح سے ہے۔ اور پھر اس کے بعد یہ قافلہ کوفہ میں لے جایا گیا۔ جب یہ قافلہ کوفے میں لے جایا گیا، کہا گیا ہے کہ زینب کوفے جانے سے گھبرا رہی تھی، آگے نہیں بڑھ رہی تھی، کیونکہ یہ وہی کوفہ ہے کہ جس میں زینب شہزادی تھی۔ لیکن جب زینب آگے نہیں بڑھی تو ایک کوڑا لعین نے امام زین العابدین کو مارا، اور یہاں پہ امام سجاد نے کہا زینب اب آ جاؤ، اب وہ امتحان کا وقت ہے۔ زینب کوفے میں وارد ہوئی ہے، کیا خطبہ پڑھا ہے۔ پھر اس کے بعد یہ وہ وقت بھی آ گیا کہ جب اسیران کربلا کوفے میں لائے گئے، عمر سعد ابن زیاد تخت پہ بیٹھا ہوا تھا اور سر حسین تشت میں تھا، اور یہاں پر اپنی چوب سے، اپنی لکڑی سے حسین کے دندان مبارک کو ہونٹوں پہ مارتا چلا جاتا تھا اور ہنستا تھا۔ اور پھر اس کے بعد یہاں پہ زینب نے کہا ہے اگر تو جانتا ہے یہ کون ہے، زیاد ابن ارقم وہاں پہ موجود تھے، انہوں نے بتلایا، ظلم پر ظلم ہوتا چلا گیا۔ پھر یہ وقت بھی آ گیا کہ جب ابن زیاد منبر پر خطبہ دے کر کہا کہ ہم حق پہ ہیں اور اہل بیت باطل پر، عبداللہ ابن عفیف کی شہادت پڑھی جاتی ہے۔ عبداللہ ابن عفیف نے قیام کیا، لیکن مسجد میں کچھ نہ کیا ابن زیاد نے، لیکن رات میں اپنے فوج کو اس کے گھر بھیج دیا، کئی لوگ شہید ہوئے۔ اور پھر عبداللہ ابن عفیف جو کہ اندھے تھے، جو نابینا تھے، دیکھ نہیں پاتے تھے، لیکن پھر بھی کیا جنگ کی ہے اور اپنی جان دے دی حسین کی خاطر، حسین کی عزت کی خاطر۔ لیکن اس شام، اس کربلا کے، اس کوفے کے زندان میں ایک چھوٹی بچی تھی، اور زینب تھی اور ام کلثوم تھی۔ جب کھانا لایا جاتا تھا تو زینب اس کھانے کو اپنے بچوں کو دے دیتی تھی، چھوٹے چھوٹے بچوں کو دے دیتی تھی۔ اور جب رات میں امام زین العابدین دیکھتے ہیں کہ زینب بیٹھ کے نماز پڑھ رہی ہے، نماز شب پڑھ رہی ہے، کیونکہ بیٹھ کے جب اہل بیت نماز پڑھتے ہیں تو یہ برداشت نہیں ہوتا ہے، کیونکہ جب رسول کو بیٹھ کے فاطمہ نے دیکھا کہ نماز پڑھ رہے ہیں تو برداشت نہ ہوا، جب علی بیٹھ کے ضربت کھا کے نماز پڑھتے تھے تو زینب کو برداشت نہ تھا۔ امام حسن بھی اس طرح۔ اب امام زین العابدین زینب کو دیکھ رہے ہیں کہ بیٹھ کے نماز شب کی تلاوت پڑھ رہی ہے، تو امام زین العابدین پوچھتے ہیں آخر کیوں پھوپھی اماں؟ تو زینب کہتی ہے جو کھانا آتا ہے میں بچوں کو دے دیتی ہوں۔ الا لعنۃ اللہ علی قوم الظالمین، سیعلم الذین ظلموا ینقلبون ماتم حسین۔ یا حسین